I'm Councillor Sean Fielding, I'm the Leader of Oldham Council, and I'm coming to you from my kitchen table this afternoon because obviously I'm following the government guidelines to stay at home so that we can protect the NHS and save lives. Now, first of all, thanks to all of those that have submitted questions for this first online question time. We had a massive response both on Facebook and Twitter, which is great. I do know that the post was shared quite widely as well though, so the only questions that we're able to answer are those that were responded to tagging in the council on Twitter or directly on the council's own Facebook page, because unfortunately we can't keep track of all of the comments on places where the post has been shared. So if you did comment somewhere else and your question has not been answered, then if and when we do this again, make sure that any questions that you want me to respond to are commented on the Oldham Council or Isle of Oldham Facebook page, so that we can make sure that the team and I can pick them up and I can give you a response online like this. So I think we should get going. The first question is from Vicky about the council's response and how quickly we acted when it became clear that the coronavirus outbreak was as serious as it was. I think that, this is a massively complicated situation. And there were obviously lots of decisions that needed to be taken around changes to services, around closing certain public buildings in a really short space of time. And at every point we were making sure that we were taking decisions in line with the government guidance. So we kept our sports centres and libraries open for as long as we could, because we know how important those are to a lot of local people. But as soon as we received the direction that those must close to stop public gatherings, we did so. We also have a really, really strong leadership team at the council, and senior officers and councillors in the cabinet who meet regularly virtually now to make sure that we're taking the right decisions as quickly as possible so that we can keep people safe and respond to the coronavirus outbreak in the most effective way. So it's really complicated, but we're working as hard as we can, following government advice and taking decisions locally in consultation with local experts in the NHS. The next one is from Carly, who's asked about which areas of Oldham have been affected. It's difficult to say whether certain areas are more affected than others because we've not got huge numbers of tests being conducted on people with coronavirus. We get the official numbers of people that have been confirmed as having it, but of course there are lots of people that are either self-isolating or have contracted it and got mild symptoms and then subsequently got better. I think the thing about coronavirus is that it will affect each community and each area of Oldham equally. The nature of a virus is that it can infect anybody, and so I wouldn't expect that there is any area or community in Oldham that is at greater risk or more affected than any other. And of course, if you want to minimise your risk of being affected by coronavirus, then just follow the guidance around washing your hands, staying in as much as you can, and if you do go out, making sure that you maintain that 2 metre social distance that the guidelines recommend. The next one is about how we're enforcing the lockdown on streets, public spaces and with our shops and businesses. That's from Karina, Orba, James and Ken, who all asked very similar questions. So our community safety team is working really closely with the police and other organisations to use the new powers that are available to us through the emergency legislation to enforce social distancing where we have to. Though I must say that most of our residents are being responsible and are staying at home as much as possible and are staying away from public spaces. You'll have seen that we worked with United Utilities to close Dovestone because we did see a huge congregation of people using Dovestone the weekend before the lockdown was announced. So we have taken the decision to close the car park at Dovestone so that we're not facilitating those mass gatherings in the way that we might have been. People are still entitled to go out, but maintain the social distance and go out as infrequently as possible. But the police and the council do have powers that they can exercise where they have to enforce the social distancing guidelines. There were some examples in the early days of where businesses and pubs and things were opening when they shouldn't have been. When that was reported to us, we were really quick to react and make sure that we went out there and told them that they needed to close. And I would encourage anybody watching this, if you do have any examples of businesses opening where they should not be, then please let us know and we'll send somebody out to investigate. The next one is from Arslan, who asked on Twitter about when home testing kits will be available. I've been watching the government's daily briefings and it's really positive that we're seeing testing being promised to be ramped up now. I'd like to see that so that we can get more people who are well back to work, especially our key workers that need to be there to care for those that might catch coronavirus, or bus drivers or supermarket workers that need to fill shelves and get people to where they need to work. In terms of the home testing kits, I'm afraid that that's not something that I can answer about when those will be available. We are waiting for the guidance from the government about who will be tested and when. But I do support the principle of making sure that we're testing our most vulnerable first with the capacity that we've got, and also testing our key workers so that they can get back to work and support local people. We've had a couple of questions on bins. The first one from Jody, Peter, Damien and Barbara, who are all asking similar questions about the changes to bins, how those were communicated, and when we might go back to the normal bin collection. So all this information is on the coronavirus portal on the council's website, which again is oldham.gov.uk/coronavirus. We took a decision at really short notice to move to a weekly grey bin collection, in which residents should put their general waste and their food waste, which of course would normally go in the green bin, but just for the time being you put it in the grey one. And that's so that we can get rid of the waste that people don't want to have to store on their properties for any length of time. If you have to as well, stuff that would go in your recycling bins, place that in your grey bin to be collected, provided it's not overflowing, and of course we're not collecting side waste. We can't say yet when the bin service will go back to normal, because it's a changing situation all the time. So we're going to continue running this weekly grey bin service for as long as we have to, but we will be communicating with people when we revert to the normal three weekly alternate collection, blue, brown, grey, how we normally do it. I'd just say that we know that it's not ideal that we only have been able to communicate that online or through the local press. Not everybody buys the local paper or has access to Facebook. So we are reliant on you telling your neighbours that there's been a change to refuse collection. I've told some of my neighbours on the street who weren't aware because they're not online. And so, like I say, it's not an ideal situation that we've not been able to do, for example, a leaflet drop like we normally would. But please do make sure that you share the information about the changes to bin collections as much as you can with your friends, family and neighbours, so that they're aware of what's happening too. Oh, another one about bins. Joe, Amanda and Sally are all concerned about the welfare of our refuse collectors. Obviously there's normally 3 people sat in a cab when we run the collections in the normal way. And there's also a question about how refuse workers are paid. So I think first of all, the bin crews are doing a great job under the circumstances, and we've worked with the unions and with our employees to adapt the way that they work so that it can be as safe as possible under the circumstances. That means that we only have 2 people in the cab of a bin wagon, where previously there would have been 3. And then we have an additional vehicle following behind so that our workers can maintain the appropriate social distance. Switching to grey bins only has meant that we've been able to do this. The cabs and the equipment are all cleaned with disinfectant every day, and we've changed the way that people start their shifts as well, so that they're not all congregating in the yard in one place in the way that they would have done a few weeks ago. There's a question about whether we employ refuse collectors through an agency. We do employ some through an agency which supplements our core of refuse collection staff. So the majority of our refuse collection staff are on the council's books as permanent members of staff, but because there are peaks and troughs in demand for refuse collection throughout the year, more people do gardening in the summer, so green bins are fuller, which means we need more people to man the collections. We do use some agency workers. All of those agency workers have the same holiday entitlement, have the same rate of pay, have the same training, and so they experience the same things from the council as a directly employed member of staff would. The next question was about fly tipping and how we'll handle an increase in it. Sadly some people will always fly tip waste. Even if it weren't for coronavirus, we would still have people fly tipping, because regardless of whether the tips are open or the bins are being collected in the usual way, some people just act irresponsibly and go and dump rubbish down country lanes. Now, our enforcement officers are still working where that is safe, and they are still able to go out and inspect any fly tipped rubbish and look for any evidence that can identify who has dumped it, so that we can pursue a prosecution. And you'll probably seen on Facebook some of those posts that we do where we can scroll through all the images of the fly tipping and say who we've taken to court and how much they've been ordered to pay in a fine. We're continuing to do that, and we do challenge this really irresponsible behaviour. Of course, every pound that we have to spend picking up that kind of waste and sending people out to inspect it is a pound that we're not spending on providing social services to vulnerable children or caring for the elderly. So it's a minority of selfish, irresponsible people that would probably do this even if it weren't for coronavirus, but we are still responding where we're getting reports of fly tipping. So I'd encourage you, if you do witness it or you do come across fly tip waste, then please report it in the usual way, and we will go out, inspect and collect, and where we can, pursue a prosecution. The next question was from Leslie about whether the streets would get disinfected. Well, I'm not aware of us being directed to disinfect streets here in the UK, but if we do receive that direction, then I guess we will act on it. The nature of the coronavirus is that it requires something living to live for any length of time on, like a person or like an animal or whatever. And so, provided you wash your hands when you come in from shopping or when you arrive at the supermarket to do your shopping, when you move into different places, provided you wash your hands, provided you keep, areas like the kitchen table or surfaces clean, that's the best way to guard against coronavirus. If the virus is on surfaces like pavements or roads, then washing your hands when you get in or when you arrive at wherever you're going should be the best safeguard against that, because of course the virus cannot survive for any great length of time on surfaces like pavements, roads or walls or whatever it may be. But washing your hands is really important, and following the government's guidance around social distancing, that's the best way to combat the spread of the virus. We had a question from Kieran and Andy about councillors and senior officers at the council, whether they would take a pay cut during this period. I think that councillors and senior officers are still doing their jobs, and in many cases are busier than ever because of the nature of the way that we're having to respond to the coronavirus pandemic. We've had to make a lot of changes to the way that services are delivered. We've had to bring new services online, like, home working is something that we were planning to introduce over the next 18 months, but we've had to do in the space of 6 days. We've still got lots more people that we're going to be taking on a temporary basis in the care sector, and that all needs to be managed. So people's workloads haven't decreased as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. It's just that many of them are working in a different way. But in many cases, the workloads have increased, and I just want to say thanks to all of the council staff and officers at all levels within the council who are working really hard to get us through this. And so the simple answer is that councillors won't be taking a pay cut during this period, and I do not believe that it will be right for them to do so anyway, because, as I've said, they are working really, really hard to make sure that our community comes through this.